everybody. Thursday for you, still Tuesday for me. Yesterday we covered the Andrew Jackson's invasion of Florida, which, by the way, and I think I forgot to mention this, starts what's known as the First Seminole War. And obviously that we win Adams-Onis Treaty and we're given Florida. We give up some of Texas. And yesterday we covered the Monroe Doctrine, which still is in effect today. The United States, the Western Hemisphere is our sphere of influence, and it still dictates policy today, almost 200 years later. Day 4 quarantine history. We're going to start to talk about Indian removal here in a second. I do want to show you my PowerPoint, and I'm not sure how well you can see it. There's the United States in 1803. That's after the Revolutionary War. I think it's neat to kind of go through and watch the United States change and shape. So you have 1803 right here. There's 1803 after the Louisiana Purchase, which, it's a huge increase in size. We doubled overnight. Here's after the war, 1812. Not a whole lot has changed. We have created some new states, opened some new territories. But if you look at the map real fast, if you notice the top of the United States, the Louisiana Purchase, the border there is not straight like it is today. And so you have disputed territory in what today is, it looks like Minnesota and North Dakota, and then the United States border, the Louisiana Purchase kind of goes into Canada. That gets fixed and corrected, and there's 1818 by the Convention of 1818, which, by the way, I told you the other day, as long as we have a set border, you have a lot less potential for conflict. And so there's United States 1818. It's starting to look a lot like the United States today. You have the big grape spot left, and you got Florida left. But from the other day, from yesterday, Florida's next. And there's 1821 with the acquisition of Florida. And if you watch the middle of the country, I'll go back here a couple times, you can see the claim we gave up to the Spanish Empire in Texas. And so the new border is the Red River there, and it goes back and forth. I just thought it was interesting. Sorry, had a call. And so it's strange how everything at school's happening so fast, and the phone rings off the hook and the email thing goes crazy. So getting back to where I was, the United States is going to make a decision to get rid of all the Indians in the Northwest Territory for good, and to stop any conflict there between settlers and Indians. And we know how the Indian story goes. White guy builds house on Indian land, Indian gets upset, and you know how the rest goes. In 1827, the federal government's going to decide to end this Indian problem in the old Northwest Territory, and they're going to order all Indians to leave. One of those Indians who refuses to leave is an Indian by the name of Black Hawk, who was a Sauk Indian leader. I know we talked in class before, most Indians don't understand the whole land ownership thing. It doesn't make sense to them. Indians would tell you, you can't own the sun, you can't own the moon, you can't own the air, you can't own the water, how do you own the land? And so Black Hawk is one of these Indians, or one of these chiefs who refuses to move. And the story is really kind of complex. It's way too complex to get into, but these guys, the Sauk Indians, were known as like British Indians. They'd helped them during the war of 1812. A lot of, not all of them, but some of the Sauk leaders flew British flags over their camps to kind of mock the United States. Black Hawk is one of these guys, and he refuses to move. In 1830, his people will come back from the winter hunt to their villages, and they'll find white people there. And you know how the story goes at that point. Black Hawk refuses to leave. he goes to the United States under a white flag. His people are shot at when he does that, and he decides to fight. And he's going to start raiding. U.S. settlements and attacking U.S. troops. Obviously, when you go to the Indian story, when the U.S. Army shows up, it never ends up well for the Indians. It doesn't end up well for Black Hawk either. And by 1832, his people are running low on food, they're running low on supplies, and Black Hawk is going to surrender. By 1850, the United States will have removed every single Indian from Northwest Territory, and so Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, those places, Indians won't really be a problem anymore. And to be honest with you, in our class, we're really coming to the end, starting tomorrow, we're really coming to the end of the Indian involvement in history, at least up until 1865 when the Civil War is over. Minimal at this point. The big event is next, and that's what we'll start tomorrow. But most of the Indians are being pushed out of the way. They're being thinned on a daily basis, and they're being removed. Side note to the whole Black Hawk War, and Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln served in the military during the Black Hawk War. Now he'll tell you he never fought. He just kind of marched around with the gun and stuff. But it's pretty interesting. So did Winfield Scott and Zachary Taylor, war heroes. We love them. Fought in the Northwest Territory. Zachary Taylor, future president, by the way. Okay. Hey, inside of your I gotta look at this real fast. Inside of your folder, you're gonna find a document that says Black Hawk Seminole Wars. It's the primary source document. It is essentially Black Hawk's version of the story. I'm gonna read it to you real fast. If I can, I'll stick this on the screen. I'm not sure. I'm gonna go play with this thing here in a little bit. I'll stick this on the screen for you in a little bit. But I'm gonna read this, and I actually put two very, very simple questions. I'm going to today, which for you, this is Thursday. I'm going to put two simple questions up there just to kind of get a sense of who's kind of on board and who's following along and stuff, and just trying to keep us all organized. So this is the story of, this is Black Hawk's version of the story, which is vastly different than the version that you get in your textbook. And so I'll read it for you, and then like I said, you're going to have two questions to answer, minimal points, but it'll just give me a way to kind of assess who's here and who's not. So it says, the whites were settling the country fast. I was out one day in a hunting bottom and met 3 white men. They accused me of killing their hogs. I denied it, but they would not listen to me. One of them took my gun out of my hand and fired it off, and then took out the flint and commenced beating me with sticks and ordered me off. I was so much bruised that I could not sleep for several nights. Some time after this occurrence, one of my camp cut a bee tree and carried the honey to his lodge. A party of white men soon followed and told him that the bee tree was theirs. He pointed to the honey and told them to take it. They were not satisfied with this, but took all the packs of skins that he had collected during the winter to pay his trader and clothe his family in the spring, and carried them off. This summer our agent came to live at Rock Island. The trader explained to me the terms of a treaty that had been made and said we would be obliged to leave Illinois, the Illinois side of the Mississippi. Real quick, just a side note, you know, a lot of times Americans sign treaties with Indian chiefs. In this instance, it's the Sauk Indians. They sign sign treaties with Indian chiefs, but they don't sign them with every single Sauk Indian chief. They sign them with a few, and once they sign them with a few, they apply them to all. And this is sort of the case here with Black Hawk. He's not one of the people who had signed this thing and agreed to give up this land. Sorry. During the winter, I received information that 3 families of whites had arrived at our village and destroyed some of our lodges, and were making fences and dividing up our cornfields for their own use. What right had these people to our village and our fields, which the Great Spirit had given us to live upon? My reason teaches me that land cannot be sold. The white people brought whiskey into our village, made our people drunk, and cheated them out of their horses, guns, and traps. It was ascertained that a great war chief, General E.P. Gaines, with a large number of soldiers, was on their way to Rock River. The war chief arrived and convened a council at the agency. He said, "I hope you will consult your own interest and leave the country you're occupying and go to the other side of the Mississippi." I, Black Hawk, replied that we have never sold our country. We never received any annuities, monies, from our American father, and we are determined to hold on to our village. The war chief said, "I came here neither to beg nor hire you to leave your village. My business is to remove you, peaceably if I can, but forcibly if I must, and I will give you 2 days to remove." By the way, this is after Sauk and his men had been raiding villages and attacking troops and stuff. But I'm remiss. We crossed the Mississippi during that night. The great war chief convened another council for the purpose of making a treaty with us. In this treaty, he agreed to give us corn in place of that we had left growing in our fields. I touched the goose quill, the pen, to this treaty and was determined to live in peace. The corn that he had given us was soon found to be inadequate for our wants. When loud lamentations were heard in the camp by our women and children for their roasting ears, beans, and squashes. To satisfy them, a small party of braves went over in the night to steal corn from their own fields. They were discovered by the whites and fired upon. Complaints were again made of the depredations committed by some of my people on their own cornfields. Black Hawk's people returned to the Illinois side of the Mississippi to plant corn on Winnebago land, and several clashes occurred between the Fauks and the Sauks and the Americans. I had resolved upon giving up the war and sent a flag of peace to the American war chief, expecting as a matter of right, reason, and justice that our flag would be respected. Yet, instead, I was forced into a war, with about 500 warriors to contend against 3,000 or 4,000. A party of whites, being in advance of the army, came upon our people, who were attempting to cross the Mississippi. They tried to give themselves up. The whites paid no attention to their entries, but commenced slaughtering them. In a little while, the whole army arrived. Our braves, but few in number, finding that the enemy paid no regard to age or sex, and seeing that they were murdering helpless women and little children, determined to fight until they were killed. As many women as could commenced swimming the Mississippi, and with their children on their backs, a number of them were drowned and some shot before they could reach the opposite shore. The massacre, which terminated the war, lasted about 2 hours. Our losses in killed was about 60, besides the number that had drowned. That's the Battle of Battle Axe in Illinois. Anyways, that's Black Hawk's version of the story. Like I said, there's a quick assignment on there. If you don't mind going on there, it's not worth a whole lot, but at least it gives me a sense of who's here and who's not. This thing is starting to run a little bit longer than I wanted, and so I will see you on Friday. See you.